around the nation. DYD Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you. Welcome to the show. Got a great show for you guys today. It's Tuesday, and I was going to make a joke about next Tuesday or Donald Trump doing crime and then going back and lies, etc. But then I realized this is Tuesday. It's a normal Tuesday, so it's kind of the joke. Anyway, we got a good show for you guys today. We have a little bit of an interesting update on the Trump booing. I know it's pointless but fun. We also are going to talk about Donald Trump, actually, it's more of the Republicans' efforts to stop the impeachment of Donald Trump, which is very interesting. So we got a couple of stories related to that, including telemarketers or telemarketing tactics, and the appearance of Jim Jordan. A wild Jim Jordan appears. What do? Trap it in the Pokeball. Okay. That's fun / interesting. And then we have a little bit of conservative, I don't know. I was going to say conservative news, but I don't think that sounds very well. But it's basically talking about the right-wing media atmosphere and who Trump supporters are mad at this time. I love seeing the right wing kind of eat its own media sources. So this is fun. So we've got that. And then we actually have an interesting look into what Microsoft is doing in Japan. So now that's a really good, serious story. And it's actually a good story, but also bad. And I'm going to explain why, because there are some serious issues that they're actually attempting to rectify related to work. So, look, it's a really interesting story. I do look forward to getting into it. A lot of fun news, like I said, and some serious stuff. And, of course, Jim Jordan. So, look, it's going to be great. Stick around. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Helps us out, gets us out to more people, et cetera, right? And so I'm actually kind of having a very good day, as well as a very interesting day. We may get monetized on Facebook, finally. So we might actually be able to make a little bit of money off ads from Facebook, which is great. So for those of you who are watching on Facebook, thank you for helping us make that happen. So if you could share out the stream, etc., it helps us out greatly too. And of course, it all goes down the show. So exciting. We're growing, and things are getting better. So that's wonderful. All right. So anyway, now you know what's funny? I actually wanted to do the story about boomers, the OK Boomer. I'll have to save that for another day because that's fun and interesting as well. And so we'll do that. But look, let's start out with Donald Trump being booed. Like I said. All right, so we'll go to that, and we've got some fun video to go along with it. So let's dive in. Okay. All right. Let's talk about having a pretty bad weekend. Now, on Saturday, we know that Donald Trump was roundly booed during a UFC match in New York. And so now what's new about that, a little bit of an update, is that we now find out the costs of that appearance. It turns out that it sent the Republican National Committee, who paid for the trip, back about $60,000. Now, this is according to details from the Washington Post. The price, which is $60,000, by the way, to just go to the UFC, it included ringside seats for Trump and some of his guests, catering, and security. So now, the president's guests, he brought along a few, about 5, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Representative Mark Meadow, Peter King, and to his two adult sons, Eric and Donald Jr. So now all that costs 60 grand. What? Now, look, I understand catering and security might get a little pricey, right? We all get that. But holy crap. Compare that to public ticket prices that can range anywhere between $100 and $700, right? So now I think, look, I'm notoriously cheap. Like, you guys know this. Um, I think this should have been no more than 5 grand at max. I mean, think about it. Even if you take the maximum ticket prices for the public, that's $700, right? And you add that together, 5 people, right? $3,500 plus transportation. And for dinner, maybe just swing by to McDonald's, get a few hamburgers, and you should be fine, right? That should be under 5 to 6 grand. Should be. It appears they got robbed, or at least I guess the RNC got robbed because that's who was paying for it. So now the important question about this is this corruption? Is this illegal? Oh, now interesting. Now we get into some fun questions, right? So now here's the thing: are these tickets to this sporting event with Donald Trump? Is that a gift? Is that considered a gift to the congressman? Now, members of the House are allowed, according to ethics rules, to take free tickets for sporting events, but they can only do that, by the way, if the event is considered a bona fide fundraiser. And so, look, this sporting event, it was not an official fundraiser. It was also not an official campaign event. It was just a couple of bros apparently going out and getting booed at the UFC, which is always fun. So I'm curious as to how these guys can justify accepting these tickets from the RNC, especially at a price of 60 grand. Remember, this is donor money. It's not just large donor money, although it's probably the majority of it, let's be honest. But also, it's the guy in Pennsylvania that votes Republican who gave $5 from his paycheck because he supports Republicans and for some reason thinks, well, if I vote Republican, someday I'm going to get rich and then people might be better watch out. Okay. That's his money. Hey, that's also, the coal executives' money. That's also maybe even the coal workers' money in West Virginia. But no, they're taking that money and they're giving it out in tickets to the UFC for Donald Trump and his rich friends. How is that not an ethics problem? Okay. Now, not only back to the House rules, right? Members also have to receive written approval from the RNC in order to take a gift. Now, the RNC, of course, came back and said, "Oh, we didn't do anything bad." An official had said the RNC had paid for the tickets only because the president had attended, right? Oh, okay, but it's not an official campaign event, nor is it a fundraiser. So I'm kind of curious what this is. Is it a gift from the RNC to the congressman or not? So I'm trying to figure out the ethics grounds on this. And look, I don't really think that anybody else is going to follow up on that. They're just going to look at this corruption and think, oh, that's fine. Oh, taking gifts, even though it's not a campaign event, perfectly fine. Who's going to go after them? The FEC? Right. Especially not the conservatives in the FEC. And let's be honest, I'm sure Democrats also do the same thing. Maybe not to this extent, but I'm sure some of the more corporate ones, maybe. Although I don't have any, of course, evidence of that, so I really don't want to do the entire both sides argument. But I am pointing out this obvious corruption, right? So now we know, by the way, that the leader of the RNC, it's Ronna McDaniel, or Ronna Romney McDaniel, by the way. She's a niece of Mitt Romney. She is actually a very staunch Trump defender, right? Especially when it comes to the impeachment of Donald Trump. Now, you also have Trump's guests, Kevin McCarthy, Meadows, and like I said, King. They are huge Donald Trump defenders. So is this a case of rewarding people who defend Donald Trump? The RNC officially saying, we're going to help you out. We're going to give you these special tickets because you're defending Donald Trump against, impeachment? I don't know if that's the case. Maybe. It's a really, really good question. Another question, of course, is why would a supposed billionaire not pay for his own tickets? Why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't, unless, of course, he's not a billionaire? Why is the RNC paying them, essentially buying gifts in that, for them to go to a non-campaign related event? How is that good use of donor money? I think that's very, very curious, especially considering how Donald Trump rarely uses his own money to do anything. In fact, he's an expert at spending other people's cash. Look at the Trump Foundation, by the way. He literally took donor money and bought not one, but two pictures of himself. Himself. The president's deeply corrupt. And so now, let's get to the fun / ridiculous part. So now that we've dealt a little bit with the ethics complaints, right? Or the ethics part of this situation. So that the RNC pays 60 G's for President Trump and some of his friends to show up to this event. And so this happens. Man, that never gets old. But wait a minute. Not more than a week earlier. In fact, it was just about a week earlier. The same thing had happened. The RNC also paid $465 per seat for a luxury suite at the Nationals Park for Donald Trump, 11 members of Congress, and senior White House staffers to attend the 5th game of the World Series, in which you had this also happen. Oh, God, I love it. Look, forgive me, but I can't help but feel a little bit of schadenfreude when I happen to see that. Here you have the RNC paying so much money, all in order to see their champion essentially get booed by the masses, especially in friendly territory. It's almost beautiful at this point. Just love it. The only thing, of course, that would make it better is if that money came out of Donald Trump's pocket, which, of course, we know would never happen because Donald Trump is, like me, notoriously cheap. But unlike me, he doesn't pay his debts. So, Lannister always pays her debts, right? I always pay my debts. Donald Trump never pays his debts, ever. In fact, he still owes several cities for campaign events that he had done. He went in, he did this campaign event. The city ran up a bunch of money that the campaign was supposed to reimburse them. Never did. They're still asking for their money. Not only that, but you got back in 2016, I did a story about the Freedom Girls, right? So the Freedom Girls went and performed at Donald Trump events, right? To this day, I don't think the Freedom Girls have been paid yet. And you know what? Ain't nobody getting that money because he's either both incredibly cheap or, more likely, and both, not rich at all. Alleged billionaire. Sad. Yeah. All right. Fun times. I have too much fun. Okay. Moving on. Yes, I use big words. I use the I use the best words, the greatest, the biggest words, tremendous words. Okay, continuing on this. All right, moving on. Now, Republicans are showing how desperate they are to stop the impeachment of President Donald Trump. According to a new report, they are now resorting to having paid callers tie up the phone lines for Democrats. I, it's amazing. So according to a new report in the New York Times, apparently the RNC has been paying to generate thousands of calls to the congressional offices of nearly 3,000. I'm sorry, 3 dozen House Democrats. Now they're doing this for a couple of reasons, according to the article. For one, to reshape opinion around the impeachment inquiry, like for example, to give the Democratic politicians the idea or that there are thousands of people that are against impeachment and that you should not continue with that inquiry. So that's number one. Number two, the other thing that Republicans want to do by doing this is essentially tie up Democrats' phone lines. What? Now, that not only makes it harder to work, but of course, like I said, gives the impression that there's tens of thousands of people that want to fight against impeachment. That might be that these people might consider their constituents, and so that's really important. So now, this while trying to have the appearance of being completely 100% organic, as usual, when it comes to Republicans, it's wholly manufactured and paid for. In fact, the Times noted that these calls, that this effort was described at a recent dinner of more than a dozen Republican aides, advisors, and elected officials. So now, you know what they call this dinner, by the way? It's considered the off the record dinner. That's what they call it. Oops. Turns out, not so off the record after all. Now, officials with the RNC told others at the dinner that these calls, well, they told them about the calls, right? And then suggested that they were automated and indicating that the aim was to basically tie up phones in Democratic offices, according to two people briefed on what was said. So, you know how many calls that they made? Over 11,000. 11,000 bots, essentially, calling me. Let's be fair. Probably not all bots. I'm sure there are people who are conservatives who are very, very angry about impeachment, and they are calling their representatives. Okay, I have no problem with that, right? In fact, our Constitution and our form of government basically says that you have a right to call your representative and redress their grievance, have them redress your grievance, right? And so that's perfectly fine. I don't have any problem with actual Republicans calling to yell at their representatives for supporting impeachment, whatever, right? No, I do have a problem, however, with paying call centers, which is what this is, paying call centers to go and harass Democratic politicians uh, and to try to paint the appearance that actual human beings are against impeachment, which, of course, there are plenty that are against the impeachment process. But at the same time, you can see where the problem lies, right? So now, RNC officials, of course, they go, oh, no. We would never use robocalls. How dare you even make the suggestion, right? Now, the official said the committee did hire a vendor in order to survey voters. Those voters who said they imposed impeachment or the inquiry were given an option to be connected to the congressional representative's office. Sure, Jan. Sure. The campaign included automated calls and text messages that urged voters to call the Democrats. Now, there are also reports of call sheets being handed out to attendees outside Mr. Trump's campaign rallies with a script urging lawmakers to, quote, end this witch hunt. Well, again, if it's real people actually making the call and getting congressional phone numbers in order to, call Democrats to voice their displeasure about impeachment, again, I don't have any problem as long as there's real people and not people being paid to do that, right? Now, the other thing, of course, is look, I love how this is a witch hunt, right? They continue calling this a witch hunt. It's really funny. That memo was released by the White House. What he's calling the transcript. And by the way, there are shirts now that say read the transcript. Well, I would love to read the transcript, but unfortunately, it's locked away in a secret server in the White House. Just saying. Maybe you could actually release the real transcript. Then again, we already essentially know what's on it. What was it? Colonel Vinland, who had testified last week, basically filled us in and said, look, there were things on that transcript that were omitted, that were changed, and that's really, really relevant. Okay, so go back and watch the report on that. But look, we don't have access to the transcript. What we have is access to a memo, and that memo was already bad enough. You literally had pressure from Donald Trump saying, hey, you need to do me a favor and let's look into the corruption in Ukraine that doesn't involve any Ukrainians. By the way, Burisma, Joe Biden. Which, to be fair, Donald Trump didn't say Burisma, but Vladimir Zelensky did. Just saying. Now, there's more here. One more thing actually about the witch hunt, because it's kind of funny, right? So back to the memo, right? It's literally spelled out. Pressure campaign. Which would mean this is the easiest witch hunt ever. This would be like a witch standing in front of everybody, turning someone into a frog, and then saying, what are you talking about? I'm not a witch. This is like Christine O'Donnell coming out and saying, I'm not a witch. Wait, are you a witch? I mean, let's look into it. If you say you're not a witch, why do you keep saying that? Okay, you must be a witch. Just saying. It's hilarious, right? But no, what's even more entertaining actually is the reaction. So now Republicans hire an army of essentially, bots, right? To basically DDoS Democratic offices in phone form, right? In order to make sure that they have a harder time doing their jobs and communicating with different departments. Departments. And you know what's funny? This isn't the first time they've actually done this. In fact, they've been doing this tactic for quite some time. Back in 2002, I've got an example here. There's a telemarketing company that was hired by the New Hampshire State Republican Party. They were hired to jam phone lines of a Democratic get out the vote effort. Democrats trying to get more people to vote. Yes, obviously to vote for Democrats, but that's kind of what a get out the vote effort really is. You're trying to get your base out. Republicans said, well, we're not interested in that. We're not going to run on popular policy or helping people, et cetera, et cetera. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to sabotage you by literally using our money to hire telemarketers to interfere with that. Because, how dare you try to get people out to vote? How dare you engage in democracy? No, we're not interested in your democracy. We're going to get our paid stooges to screw you over. I mean, look, Republicans literally play the dirtiest. And why? It's because they can't win any other way. They're literally trying to make Democrats think that there's some gigantic anti-impeachment wave. Now, maybe in Republican circles for sure, right? But in reality, when you don't just look at the Republican Party, but when you look at the American people as a whole, you have half of all Americans, according to at least one poll, around 51% actually support impeachment and removal. 51% impeachment and removal. When we don't even know, exactly what the impeachment hearings are actually going to produce. And I think they're going to produce a lot. So there's that, right? There's a separate poll out. And this was taken last month, right? Only 30% of Americans don't support impeachment of the president. So that's a small minority, right? 47%, a plurality, say impeach the MFer. That's interesting. So now let's go to you know these Republican congressmen, right? So these are the guys who are holding the wall, who are going to decide, especially in the Senate, Donald Trump's fate, right? So now they're defending Donald Trump, and they're doing so not because they personally like him. Look, there's a lot of people on the inside, a lot of reporters, a lot of unnamed congressional staffers that have all said the same thing. That people in the Senate, most of them, most of the Republicans, hate Donald Trump. They can't stand the guy. Well, then why did they defend him? Well, it's because of the numbers. It's a numbers game. And that's what this impeachment thing is as well. Impeachment is a numbers game. Republicans have to continue to keep the numbers when it comes to reelection and winning the election in 2020. Not just, like I said, Trump's reelection, but their own reelection in their own districts. Now, if they don't support Trump and they, don't have the numbers to do so, they will face a primary challenge. And if there are enough angry Trump supporters and Republicans, if Republicans' support for Donald Trump continues to stay at 87 to 90%, then that challenger is going to wipe the floor with them and they're going to lose their jobs. They're going to get replaced. Republicans don't want that to happen because they're essentially political creatures, right? And you could also say political cowards, and that would work too, as most politicians are. They don't want to lose their job. But the other thing that they're looking at is if they're going to get wiped out in Congress and in the White House. So again, if the numbers are not there for Donald Trump to win re-election, well, that's a huge problem. Then that could see Republicans, senators possibly turning against him, because that would ensure, like I said, another disastrous election cycle defeat for the Republicans. So there's a lot of political stuff at play, but it all comes down to the numbers, right? So now the reason I get to that is that if Republican support for Donald Trump drops, then it's done. It's over. These Republican congressmen will flip on Donald Trump faster than a ninja does flips. Okay? I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. They will, because they despise him. It's not like, I respect this elder statesman, so that's why I'm gonna have his back, because he has our back and he's basically what's best for the party, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No, they only support him because the base is rabid and rabidly supports Donald Trump. So let's be fair on that. Now, while these numbers are up, Republicans will play the dirtiest tricks, and they will attack the process, which is what they're doing right now, by the way, because in reality, they can't defend Donald Trump. It's increasingly hard to defend him, and they don't have anything else to fall back on. So they're in a real rock and a hard place. And so here you have attack the process and basically ensure that the Democrats can't actually do their jobs. Dirty tricks. All right. Crazy. All right. So speaking of dirty tricks, what we're going to do, and I'm not doing the dirty trick. All right. But I will come back and we'll do a fun little segment on Jim Jordan and how he is going to try to sabotage impeachment. So that'll be fun. And then we're going to go conservative media. We'll talk about that. And Japanese work weeks. So that's really, really interesting. Like I said, stay here. Please like and share. Super chats, comments, etc. And patrons, of course, channel members, all that stuff right after this break. Stay right here around the nation.
Mike Pounds.
Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, TOT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. All right, so we've got comments. We've got, let's see, um, patrons to thank. We got all sorts of stuff. So let's start out with member comments first. Got a couple. Ann Anderson says, "Wow, a new type of DDoS attack, dialed denial of service attack. Ah, it's really good. I like that. It's to be fair though, not exactly new. Something Republicans have been doing for quite some time. But I do love the name. So thank you, Ann. Then Sarchek says, fake calls, automated Republican scam. The Republicans are nothing but smoke and mirrors. Yeah, agreed. James Watson has a good question. And he asks, do Democratic politicians actually pay attention to news like this? Or are they going to buy into the trick? So that's a good question. Now, look, Republican, okay. Let me start that again. Politicians generally do not get a lot of calls. They generally don't get a lot of public interaction. That's why you have so many politicians, and this is starting to change, by the way, with AOC, etc. But a lot of these politicians, they believe, since they don't hear from a lot of people, that their districts are incredibly conservative. Even in some of the more progressive districts, you still have politicians, and again, this is traditional, and I think it is changing, that still believe that their district is more conservative than like the most conservative districts in like Alabama. It's insane. And that's, of course, one reason, and money being the other reason, of course, why you have a lot of these politicians that think, oh, no, we have to have a centrist. We have to have a right-wing candidate. We have to have, corporate Democrats or supposed centrists, people like Pete Buttigieg from South Bend. He's a centrist Democrat. We got Amy Klobuchar. Everybody loves Amy Klobuchar. She's such a good centrist. She's going to rise in the polls. Just wait. In reality, of course, they're completely wrong. They don't get it. They don't understand. So my point is, in answering that question and bringing up that, is the fact that I do think that this might actually have an impact on some of these Democrats, not progressives, because progressives actually understand that these are not real people, that real people don't react like this. Yes, I'm sure you're going to have a lot of Trump supporters, Trump supporting individuals that actually do, call Congress, etc. And that's fair. And I'm not saying that all of them are bots or telemarketers or paid trolls, etc. But that does exist in large part on the right because they don't actually have grassroots. Their grassroots support. I mean, every time we talk about these sad rallies, right? And I'm not talking about Trump rallies, which still do get a lot of people, but I think it's like essentially the same people coming out day in and day, to the same rallies, because it's like an insular club. But when you get these like counter protests from the right wing, they're really small, and generally counter protesters from the progressive or from the left wing tend to outnumber them quite a bit. So that shows you that there's not really a whole lot of grassroots support. And you can say the same essentially for the corporate Democrats as well, because they don't have a lot of grassroots support. Most of their support comes from the big donors. So I love that. That's a good question. It's actually a great question. And I do believe that some of these Democrats might fall for the trick, or might have if there wasn't this reporting. And it's, again, great reporting from the New York Times, of all places. So, yeah, look, they do some good investigative journalism. I wish they did more and less shitting on Bernie Sanders. But okay. Anyway, let's move on. Let's go to Jim Jordan. Or the internet essentially dunking on Jim Jordan. Oh, no, actually, you know what? No, I've got patrons to thank as well. So it's a good thing I remember that. Very important. So I want to thank For the Truth, Ahmad Henry, and Alex Care. So thank you to those patrons. Patreon.com/TOATNation. It's one way you can support independent progressive media. Another way is becoming a channel member. I want to thank Starch Tech, Actus Magos, Platypi, and Vince Hinton. So those are our channel members of the day. So thank you. All right. And you can become a channel member by hitting the join button below, by the way. All right. Please like and share the stream. And now we go into the rest of the show. All right. Republican politicians are discussing yet another plan to attempt to sabotage the impeachment of President Donald Trump. So now this involves moving Jim Jordan to an important position. Yeah. So now, according to CBS News, Republican leadership has been debating the placement of Ohio GOP Congressman Jim Jordan to the House Intelligence Committee. Now, the Intelligence Committee, of course, is doing the impeachment inquiry, which is, I guess, look, hilarious when you say Jim Jordan and intelligence in the same sentence. But now, the problem with that is that he would, of course, be in a position to allegedly spy on and disrupt the impeachment inquiry, because Jim Jordan, of course, is not in favor of impeachment. Now, these discussions among House leadership, according to CBS News, are reported to be, quote, both active and serious. Seriously. Now, that's bad if you know anything about Jim Jordan. Now, one thing is that, look, this guy is a conspiracy theorist. He sees the deep state behind every single attack against Donald Trump. Yeah. It's so bad that you even have former Republicans saying, wait a minute, you're going to put that guy on the Intelligence Committee? You've got to be kidding. And like I said, one of his other conspiracy theories is that it was not Donald Trump, but the person who was really colluding with Russia was Hillary Clinton in order to lose the 2016 election. I don't think they really thought that one through, did they? No, I don't think so. But that's just a sampling of the insane things that Jim Jordan has believed, right? Not to mention all the, the locker room sex scandal and stuff that he was involved in when he was a gym teacher, which is why, of course, people like to spell his name G-Y-M Jordan. Love it. Now, this has gotten so crazy that conservative political strategist Steve Schmidt said this about him. Quote, Jim Jordan is a clown, albeit a dangerous one. He is an heir to McCarthy, demagogic, dangerous, and faithless to his oath in America. He is unfit to serve in Congress. So, that's Steve Schmidt, right? Former Republican strategist to the McCain campaign. Back when Republicans were somewhat reasonable, at least comparative to today. So, like I said, Steve Schmidt, right? And this was before some of this Ukraine stuff, by the way. So let me just point that out. Now, you also have journalist David Rothkopf, who also weighed in. He said this shows the GOP's main line of defense will be letting a monkey into the room and having him throw poop at everyone during the proceedings. Sorry. I got a visual on that. Trust me, you don't want that visual, okay? Wow. Look, there's a lot of faith for Jim Jordan here, right? But look, there's more, because now the internet has gotten wind of this, and you know what happens when the internet jumps on something. You get tweets like this. Michael O'Grady says, never dealing with the facts, GOP might move Jim Jordan to the Intelligence Committee so he can attack the investigation from within. Okay, fair enough. David Cole says, Jim Jordan and intelligence, one hell of an oxymoron. Dan Jordan adds in that he will finally be exposed to some form of intelligence. Mm. Dennis Krosky says Jordan coming in contact with anything related to intelligence would be like the collision of matter and antimatter. Ooh. Yeah, well, look, that'd be kind of bad because they both annihilate each other. Jim Jordan annihilating intelligence, but then again, at the same time, intelligence kind of annihilates Jim Jordan, so maybe it kind of evens out. All right. More. Texas Pelican 56 said, there's an inherent clash of concepts. Intelligence and Jim Jordan? Kofefe Jones said, okay, so they're going to go with the middle school JV team on this one? Maybe. That's what it sounds like it. Whereas Mitch Kosterman says simply, Jim Jordan and intelligence do not go together. And then finally, Major General Benedict Arnold said this, Jim Jordan, intelligence, it writes itself. Indeed, it sure does. Can't wait to see what kind of shenanigans happen if they literally do this move. It's going to be disastrously bad, but funny. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Oh, you know what? Yeah, that was the wrong one. I had the wrong sidebar up. That's okay. Whatever. I didn't even notice that either. Okay, moving on. Still fun. Now there are very few things progressives and people like Matt Judge. All right, take 3. Now there are very few things that progressives and people like Matt Drudge have in common. Now one of them appears to be pissing off Trump supporters. Now, this is according to the Daily Beast. Trump fans have been fuming for weeks at the Drudge Report. Now, look, those of you not familiar with the Drudge Report, it's basically a right-wing aggregation site. So they take stories from all different sources, and they aggregate them all for their audience, so they can go and read these things. Stuff from Fox News, even stuff from the New York Times, Washington Post. In fact, the problem here is that they've shared too many supposed left-wing sources. So let me get into that. Now, these Trump supporters are alleging that Drudge, by posting links, has backed Democrats when it comes to impeachment and has ignored Republican talking points in favor of the president. So now, this brings to mind that if you were not 100% devoted to the dear leader, then the MAGA crowd will come after you. Kind of like what they tried to do with Fox News, except that it didn't quite work. Now, apparently, there is a new cottage industry online popping up to create Drudge Report clones and potentially steal some of their 80 million plus visitors to the website. Now, the 80 million figure came from the numbers from September. So, look, man, I mean, that's a lot of visitors. It's more than what we get. Now, here's the thing. So let me go through some of the names that this competition for Drudge Report's viewers or readers is, right? So now, one of them is News Ammo, Rantingly, Liberty Daily. Okay, that one makes sense. Okay, Liberty Daily, right? That's conservative, right? And What Finger? Fun times. Fun. Okay. So now the owners of these sites say, without evidence, they have seen huge bumps in traffic since outspoken conservatives began accusing Drudge of having an anti-Trump bias. Now, like I said, Drudge mainly does news aggregation, although they have broken individual stories. In fact, the reason that Drudge is even on the radar is because they originally broke stories of Bill Clinton having an affair with Monica Lewinsky. So that's a whole Lewinsky scandal. That's why they've gained such a reverence in right wing news circles, right? So, like, I get, just got to point out why they're so well known in conservative circles. But now, in the era of super crazy, that's apparently not good enough. No, you have to back Donald Trump 100%. And if you post too many left wing sources, like the Washington Post, well, then, I mean, that's it. You're done. You're obviously a tool of Silicon Valley. It's crazy. All right. Now, more from the story here. The Daily Beast points out that Gab, the social media network popular with white supremacists, also launched its own Drudge-style news aggregator site called Gab Trends, amid discontent from Trump supporters with Drudge. So now, how effective is that going to be? I don't necessarily know. I don't think there's a lot of white supremacists, but then again, look, I guess they're good. They can really corner the market. They're very niche, and I guess that works. I don't know. But as far as gaining broad appeal, look, I don't know. Ask Fox News if they've lost a significant number of Trump viewers that have gone over to, Gab or any of these other new popped up pro Trump outlets. I don't know. What I do know is Fox News hasn't even lost Donald Trump. Not even the New York Times has lost Donald Trump. There's a recent story that came out that the White House still won't give up their subscription to the New York Times. Now, I think Donald Trump watches CNN. He watches Morning Joe because, of course, right? Reads the New York Times. Look, maybe it's less reading and more hate skimming, where he just looks for his name and then looks around his name to see if they're criticizing him or not, right? I also think he occasionally looks at the comics. Why not? And then rages at the crossword for being slightly too advanced for him, for his vocabulary. I know words, tremendous words. Right. But okay. Look, we've seen this before. We've seen right-wing sites pop up before and generally not do very well. Like, literally, The Blaze is hemorrhaging money. I don't know how they're still, around. But they're still going, even though they're, running out of money. Maybe it's because of these right-wing billionaires. But anyway, now as far as non-billionaire funded sites, remember Reagan Book? It was supposed to be the right-wing Facebook alternative. Didn't work out. Didn't work out very well. Or Trump TV. Trump TV with Boris Epstein. Oh, that's my favorite. Where they literally got made fun of because it was an absolute train wreck. Epic fail. Well, okay, anyway. The anger is real, right? In fact, you've got anger from such influential figures on the right as Jim Hoft, who is the founder of the Gateway Pundit and alleged floor pooper. He has repeatedly urged Drudge to, quote, come home. Come home to what? It's really amazing what happens when you dare to post some factual information. Drudge literally, like I said, is an aggregator of news. But, okay, apparently they dared to post too many factual articles from the Washington Post, especially about Donald Trump and Ukraine. So now, forget facts, right? The Republicans tend to live in an alternative universe, and any attempt to pop the bubble gets a massive rebuke. Again, 87 to 90% of conservatives support Donald Trump. So it's not as if it's a minority. These are Republican voters that are massively pro-Trump, that are buying these conspiracy theories. So when you point out that, no, look at the memo, read the memo itself. I'd say read the transcript, but he's got it locked away in the White House somewhere in a secret server. So, yeah, I mean, a secret server for national security purposes. Only the most classified stuff is supposed to go in there. And Donald Trump just locks away his calls and his transcripts. So all we get is a memo. That still, the memo is bad enough because you can see a pressure campaign on Vladimir Zelensky in order to do investigations into his political rivals. So there's that. But again, go against the right wing narrative, go against Donald Trump, massive rebuke. Now, Howard Polskin, however, an observer who tracks right wing media at The Writing, says, quote, if criticism of Drudge keeps happening, it may create an opening for one of these sites to really become much more popular with the audience. And that's what they're hoping for. Now, the Daily Beast also spoke to the operator of Whatfinger. So now, Whatfinger, it's actually kind of an interesting concept, really. So it seems like it's more social media, but they post news stories and allow you to thumbs up, thumbs down, or give a middle finger. Well, I mean, who of us on Facebook didn't wish for that option? Facebook, Zuckerberg, get on that. Not a bad idea. But anyway, this guy who identifies himself as a loudmouth editor named Sergeant Pat, he said, without providing evidence, unfortunately, that traffic had jumped 75% amid conservative dissatisfaction with Drudge this fall. Well, if that's true, good for him. Well done. Thumbs up. He said, and this is Whatfinger's operator, said our readers are libertarians and conservatives, and they say Drudge is too far left now. Too far left. Drudge, left wing. Complete and utter insanity. Come on. But again, I think these people live in the upside down. They don't get it. They don't get it. Reality, look, Trump supporters, I don't think they're going to actually give up Fox News. I don't think they're actually going to give up Drudge. I think they're making much ado about nothing because one thing that conservatives love doing is raging online at things and then not giving them up. Remember all the boycotts? They lasted about a day. Although it was, and let's be fair, a lot of the left-wing boycotts also don't do very well, but that's here and there. No, I do think, though, that it was pretty funny to watch conservative boycotts of Nike and what was it? The coolers, because you essentially, and I forget the cooler maker, but because conservatives, they don't just boycott, they generally set things on fire or shoot them. And it's just really funny to see them either burning or shooting things that cost them, that they already paid for. Hilarious as always. But hey, man, you do you, right? But at the same time, like I said, I don't think anything's going to last. Donald Trump's been raging about Fox News for months now, and he still hasn't stopped watching them. In fact, we just learned that Sean Hannity might know more about what the government's been doing than the government. And that's thanks to Donald Trump basically telling him everything. So he's got that kind of buddy-buddy close relationship with Sean Hannity, who is a Fox News host. So I don't think he's going to give up Fox anytime soon, to be fair. And look, Polskin basically said the same thing. He said on these conservative sites that are popping up, quote, I think you're going to see a lot of these sites falling by the wayside unless they can do it so cheaply, it really doesn't matter. He's got a point, because at the end of the day, unfortunately, media is kind of a business. And what you're doing, and the problem with these sites that's pointed out in the article is that they're not coming up with new features other than, of course, the middle finger reaction, which I like, because look, who hasn't seen that, right? Or wanted that and said, man, I really want to flip off this article right now. I'm serious. It's a really good idea. I like it. But unless you have something that's really new and innovative, and a lot of these sites don't, and they're just copying the format of Drudge Report, which again is very, very simple, to be fair. And that's one of the reasons that Drudge Report is so popular, is ease of use. And I can definitely understand the appeal of that. But if all you're doing is copying that, then of course you're not going to do very well. You've got to come with your own angle. You've got to do something original, maybe original reporting, or some sort of investigative journalism, or I know, imagine a conservative site doing that, um, or something commentary. If you're not doing anything like that, then look, and you're just relying on the anger of Donald Trump supporters to sustain you, well then you're not going to have a very good time in the already oversaturated media landscape. But then again, what do I know? I'm only in the media landscape. Okay. All right. One more story here. Moving on. Here comes the 4-day work week. Well, I mean, at least if you live in Japan and if you work for Microsoft and if you were taking part in doing both in August. Nonetheless, really interesting news. Apparently, the company, Microsoft, had performed a trial run back in August called the Work Life Choice Challenge. Now, what it did and what that meant is that basically Microsoft would shut down its offices every Friday and give employees all an extra day off. Now, you might be thinking, insanity. How are they going to function? What's going to happen if employees do not spend every single working moment at work? What's going to happen? Well, apparently, you're going to gain productivity. No, I'm not kidding. It turns out that productivity measured by sales per employee at the specific place in Japan at Microsoft actually went up. And it didn't just go up slightly, it actually went up by almost half, 40%. What is going on? Now, that's compared to the same period the previous year. And that's when they were running 5 days a week. Now, how's that possible? Well, look, for one, they actually did some interesting measures that I think make perfect sense for businesses. For one, managers cut down the time spent in meetings. Look, you spend time in meetings, like you get meetings like an hour, a half hour, a month, or a week, whatever. Well, that does cut into productivity, right? You eliminate that or try to reduce the number of meetings and the length of meetings to really important business, and of course, you're going to be more productive. Great. Okay, that makes sense. They also cut down the time people spent responding to emails. Okay. Oh, look, that can, of course, waste a lot of time as well. Um, Not only that, but employees were also encouraged to cut down on meetings altogether by using online messaging. So if you need something or whatever, okay, online message. All right. Hey, that makes sense, right? Now, in return for making things more efficient and productive, they actually ended up getting an extra day off. And so that's great. And there are other benefits, of course. Benefits for obviously the workers. They get an extra day off to spend time with their family and, actually live their lives. That's great. And not only that, but the company also won as well. They have more productive, happier employees. And they actually save money because they didn't have to run on Friday. They actually save money on electricity. Hey, look, this seems like a win-win, right? So now I like it. I love the idea. Right now, weekdays are too long. Weekends are way too short. Work-life balance, let me tell you what, in this field especially, but just like in many others, there is literally no balance. So now, again, what made this very interesting is not only what they did, but also where they did it. Japan is notorious for overworking its employees. In fact, it's more infamous than anything because they have worked their employees literally to death. So now there's actually a word for it, and I didn't know this before. The term is karoshi. Karoshi. You know what that means? It means death by overwork, plainly put. So now it happens, these deaths, mainly due to stress induced illness or severe depression from working an insane amount of hours and not getting enough rest and not getting enough time to themselves or with their families. So it's work, 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 work all the time. Well, of course, you're not going to have any time to do the things that make you happy. And so, of course, uh, we've had stories of people flinging themselves off buildings just in order to get away from the culture of overwork. One example was an employee at a Japanese advertising giant named Dentsu, who died by suicide on Christmas Day. Tokyo officials later said that the staffer had worked excessive amounts of overtime. And so that's really important to point out. Now, you could say, wait a minute, it's overtime. Overtime, you get paid more. Not if you're salary. Now, if you're hourly, okay, then you get paid more for overtime. But if you're a salary worker, you're SOL, dude. Sorry about that. And look, the other thing about overtime is some people say, well, isn't that optional? Don't, sometimes, of course, they ask you to do overtime. I used to get asked a lot to do overtime when I worked in the factories or, worked in retail. And sometimes I'd take it and sometimes I wouldn't. It would depend on what I needed to do, right? Well, in Japan, a lot of that overtime tends to be mandatory. And even if it's not, there is a lot of societal pressure on these workers to work that overtime, to take those hours. So, I mean, the work culture in Japan is very, very serious. Okay. And you can see the effects of that. So now, um, look, all of this, by the way, it basically there's a huge corporate culture of overwork. Where literally what you're doing is working, sleeping, and eating in between, right? And sometimes employees, and I just saw a recent story on this. We had we saw an employee, a Japanese employee, literally get fined, punished for taking a lunch break just to eat. Come on, man. That's awful. That's ridiculous. All right. So now there's another example of overwork and the toll it costs. And this is a reporter at a Japanese broadcaster who had died after working extremely long hours. Her employer had said that she had clocked in a total of 159 hours of overtime the month before her death. 150. Jesus. So look, this is a big, big problem that happens in Japan. Now, where it gets also more interesting, and especially for an American context, is how it could relate to working conditions in America, right? So now we have this notion of hard work. We're not as bad as the Japanese in that respect, but and also maybe less cultural and more necessity. And so here in America, we have a massive income and wealth disparity problem, right? So we have massive, amazing productivity. However, wages have not kept up to that productivity. And so people are working longer and longer hours. They're grabbing more and more overtime. They're having maybe second or third jobs in order to make ends meet. And so here in America, we have a similar problem of overwork, but not quite to the extent, and also for different reasons. Um, and so, look, you have to work to be able to afford rents that are continuing to rise, home prices that have risen, commodity prices that have risen. You also don't get free healthcare, so you have to either have a good job to pay for that, or several jobs to be able to afford health insurance premiums if you're not insured by your employer. And so, all of that stuff, is really, really important. Uh, and so, but the interesting thing is is that if Microsoft can do 4-day weeks in Japan with that culture of overwork, why, with a lot of modification to, for example, wages here in America, why couldn't that happen here? And so that's very interesting, right? Now, before that happens, there's of course need to be other changes in place. Because the thing that I worry about from a worker perspective is, okay, so say we have 4-day weeks. Well, then they're just going to, they're either going to increase our hours throughout the week instead of, for example, 40-hour work spaced across 5 days, right? That's a normal week. Well, okay, so they're just going to increase our hours to 12 hours a day for 4 days a week. Well, now that wouldn't be good, right? Because that doesn't do anything to help work-life balance, and I've worked that shift before, and it can be difficult. And the problem is, of course, pay. A lot of people can't afford to take that fifth day off, so they can't afford to only work 4 days a week. So there has to be an increase in wages, especially the minimum wage, if this is to actually be effective. And so that's a real issue, and those are real concerns that do need to be addressed. But at the same time, I think a 4-day work week is wonderful. Is a wonderful idea, and I do give Microsoft credit for actually running this experiment. And by the way, they're going to actually run this again. They're going to do this another time to see if it continues to have the same kind of impact. We continue to see, or they will continue to see, a bigger increase in production and productivity for the days that their workers are working. And so, and look, it's not just them; it's the government of Japan also taking the same initiative, and small businesses in Japan doing the same thing. So, if we could start looking into ways to do that here, well, that would be really, really important in redressing the work-life balance and making sure that workers are productive, happy, as well as being able to make the bills. Okay. All right, guys. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. 200 people, 80 likes. Come on, you guys can do better. You guys can do a lot better. Don't let me down. All right. Other than that, thank you guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow.